As we welcome in Mo Kushner, who's looking better.
You hear that? I'm sorry.
And Dr. Block. And Aaron Swade.
You've got to look when you walk. And
Mordechai Sultan. And Dr. Guy, Nachman Chapler, Irving Fishbaum, Menachem Yamansky, Marshall Castle, Michal, Mel Zachter, Shelley Zeitlin, Shimon Klein, Eddie Chazan, Mark Frankel, Berish Gesselman, Saba, Ilya Shutman, Rabbi Kranz, Moshe Lehman, Avram Schenkman, Abe Arbach, Yitzi Muller. Here we have in Shul, Reb Goldstein, Reb Gedalia Engel, Reb Kramer, Moshe Jackanen. We are holding the very top line of Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph, and we are learning that all children should get into yeshiva easily with welcoming hands. And the Gemara is now, we had a question. If a woman gives her husband, she goes ahead and gives her husband a tablet, and he writes again on it and hands it to her. Can we assume that the woman knows the halacha that she has to transfer to her husband in order for it to be good? But we learn it out from the following case. A guarantor, let's say Marshall owes me $1 million, and two witnesses sign, and Mark signs under the witnesses as a guarantor. Why Mark would do that? He had a temporarily brain freeze, and
he loved me. That's why.
And anyway, probably has more to do with loving me. But anyway, so let's get the case.
Ego battle here.
Let's get the case that Marshall is on the hook for $1 million to me, and there's two witnesses signed, and underneath the witnesses, Mark writes that he's a guarantor. Now remember, you can only collect from mortgage property if there's a curl, if people know about it. And the only thing that generates the curl is the Adam. And Mark wrote the guarantee after the Adam signed. So therefore, this is a very obvious conclusion. If the guarantor first signs after the signature of the witnesses, then I could only collect from Mark's available property. I can't collect from the buyers from Mark because nobody knows about it because he signed after the shtar. But the bottom line is that we assume over here, and this is the point of the Gemara, we assume over here that Marshall knew that he had to transfer the paper to Mark, that it should be binding on him as a guarantor. Says the Gemara, yeah, but that's a man. Maybe a woman who doesn't learn Gemara doesn't know that. Amar Ravashi, my kusha. Dilma Gavra Shani. Maybe a man is different. The Yoda Laknuye, because he knows the din that you have to effect such a transfer. Now, when I was preparing this, I had a very obvious kasha over here, which I didn't get a chance to research, but it's a very obvious question. And that question is that in our case, we're not only dealing with a woman, we're dealing with the husband. So even if the woman doesn't know, if we've established that a man does know, So if a man does know, then the man will insist that she transfers to him the tablet in order that the get should be good.
Maybe he doesn't care.
Huh? Then what's he giving it to her for? Then no, give it to her. No, nobody's forcing him to give it. And that's...
I mean, we have this far in the Gemara L'tzira Kamachavan that he might, there's no problem for him, it's just for her.
So you're saying that you want to suggest that maybe he knows and he's making a sham and it's going to create children out of Mamzerim. You're painting him as a real bad guy.
What bothers me...
One second, I just want to see... Article doesn't say anything about my question. I don't know. I thought of your answer, but I don't like it. It has nothing to do with you. I just don't like it. Anyway, but now the Gemara brings a proof. El Amar Rav Ashi Mehacha. This is clear. Isha Kaiseva says Gita, a woman could write her own get and then transfer it to the husband. And a man could write his receipt for paying, for having paid the ksuva, give it to her. She'ein kiyam get, because what makes the get a vehicle is the signatures. So therefore, it's okay for the woman to write it. But if the woman is writing it, obviously we assume that she knows that she has to give it over to the husband. So that's the answer to our question. Now, Amar Rava, cause of laget, he writes to her a get, a regular get. V'nosen b'yad avdoi, and he gives it to his servant Tony. Chatzkel writes his wife a get and gives it to his servant Tony. Now, Tony can't be a shliach to give a get, because you can't be a shliach unless you yourself can be in the din of Gittin and Kedushin. And since that Evet Kanani isn't in the din of Gittin and Kedushin, he can't be a shliach. But what does he do? Because of l'shtar matana olav. Then the husband writes a gift document gifting Tony to his wife. And now, when Tony belongs to her, Tony is her chotzer, and the get is in her chotzer, and therefore she's divorced. So the Gemara wants to know, is that considered like he gave it to her? Because in order for it to be a good get, it has to come from him to her. It can't come to her afterwards. Like we're going to see a case. A case is if he puts a get to her in his courtyard, then he sells the courtyard to Marshall, and Marshall sells it to her, that's not a good get, because it didn't come from the husband to her. It went from the husband into Marshall's rishus, and then from Marshall to the wife. So that's not good. But here, he wrote the get, gave it to Tony, and then wrote a document to her giving her Tony. And automatically, when he gives her Tony, he's giving her also the get, because now it's in the courtyard. So I'm a Rava, kosav a get, v'nosna b'yad avdai. Again, he writes a get, gives it to Tony, and then v'kosav l'shtar matana olav, and then gives her a gift deed that she's getting Tony, kanaseyu, she acquires Tony, and since the get is by Tony, so it's her chatzer, and chatzer shel adam kain alai umiskareshes by. So the Gemara asks, but there's a detail over here. The din is that a chatzer maleches, a mobile chatzer, is not kaina. V'amai chatzer malechesi, it's a mobile chatzer, it's a moving chatzer, a chatzer maleches like kana. And even if you'll say that Tony is standing, if when he's moving it's not kinda, then he doesn't acquire even if he's standing or sitting, because that means that it is a potential mobile courtyard. The Hilchasa, the Gemara says the case that Rav is talking about is Bekofis, where the Eved is tied up, so he can't move. And since he can't move, it's not a Chatzim Aleches, and therefore she acquires. And has to be talking about, obviously, that she's on top of the get, on top of Tony when he's tied up. Because if he's not on top of Tony when he's tied up, it's not a Chatzim Ishtameres. A Chatzim Ishtameres will not, it's not a guarded Chatzim. So it's talking about that she's standing there. Now, V'amarava, Kasav la get, if he writes her a get, V'nosnai b'chatzeirai, and he puts the get in his courtyard, and then V'kasav la shtar matan olav, and the same thing. He writes her a gift document that he's giving her the courtyard. Kanaseyu, she acquires it, and Miskareshes by. Now the Gemara says with Tzricha, we need both cases. Dia ashminon eved, because if we teach the case of an Eved, Havamina Dafka Eved, Aval Chotzer, but by a courtyard, we should be geyser, Aval Chotzer, but a courtyard, we should be geyser that we're afraid from the case that I told you with Marshall, where he puts the get in his courtyard, then sells the courtyard to Marshall, and Marshall sells it to her. That's not good. Because then it's not coming from the husband to her. I might think that by a courtyard, ligzer mishum chatzeira bala achamikan, a courtyard that comes afterwards, where he doesn't give to her directly the courtyard from him, he gives it to Marshall, and Marshall gives it to her. So the get is not coming directly from the husband to her. V'yash min al chatzer, ava min a dafka chatzer. Aval Eved, in the case of Eved, we should be geyser a case where the Eved is not tied up, and then it wouldn't be good because it's a chatzim aleches. Ligzer kafis atusheina kafis. Kamash malon. So now the Gemara has a different problem. Amar Abaya, Michtei, Chatzer mehechi yisrabi. How do we know that chatzeroi shel adam knuyaloi? How do we know that a person's chatzer acquires from them? Miyoda, because we have a drasha that chatzeroi shel adam is like their hand. Oh, if chatzer has to be kaina mitam yad, so then it has to operate just like the yad. Now, by a yad of a woman, it's a get even against her will. He could put it into her hand even against her will. She doesn't want it. My yoda the isa bein medata bein bal karcha, but that's not true by a chotzer, because by a chotzer you can't give her a gift if she doesn't want it. So af chatzera the isa bein medata bein bal karcha, but that's not true. You can't give her a courtyard against her will. V'amatana medata isa, you can only give a person a gift if they want it. Bal karcha lesa. Says well, wait a second. Maskva Shimon Ba'ashi v'shliches lekabala. The din is that a husband could give a get to her agent. The din is that if, let's say, she doesn't want to see his face ever again, she could send a shliach to accept the get on her behalf. The Gemara says, "V'shlichas lekabala dimedaita isa." You could only give it to a shliach if she wants that person to be a shliach. Bal karcha lesa. You can't do it against her will. And yet the din is that you could have a shliach lekabala, even though the shliach obviously is not the same as yad. Yad you could do against her will, but a shliach lekabala it could only be if she agreed that the shliach should accept it for her. Yet v'kavi shliach lekabala. So Abaya tells you, What are you comparing shlichus? Shlichus doesn't work mitam yad. V'abayat the shlichus miyada is rabbi. Shlichus doesn't work mitam yad. It's because there's an extra hey. It could have said v'shilach, and it says v'shilcha. It's rabbi. That's where you know shlichus from. So it doesn't have to be similar to a yad. V'ba yisayma. By shlichus also there's an element of bal karcha. Because if a girl is a katana, her father could accept the get on her behalf against her will. There is a shlichus bal karcha by get. Shekain of mekabel get lebitay katana. A father could accept a get on behalf of his younger daughter, bal karcha, against her will. And by the way, this this is amazing, but I think that this is the only place in Shas where this din is. That a father could accept a get on behalf of his daughter against her will. It's really remarkable. As we welcome in Michael Druck from Delaware, it's good having him. Sandy Grunfeld is joining us, and Ruven Pollack came in as we were talking, as did Eddie Holtzman, and Yitzi Muller, Abe Arbach. Yes?
In that case of the father is not Mekabel Bal Karcha of only because she's a katana.
But that's called Bal Karcha.
Yeah, but because the katana herself can't be Mekabel either. She needs a father to Mekabel it. She wouldn't be able to Mekabel if it wasn't for the father. It's not really the same thing.
It is. It's, say the words after me. It's Bal Karcha.
Could a person give the father the get Bal Karcha to the father?
Not Bal Karcha, Bal Karcha.
But the father's Mekabel it for the girl. So could the husband give the father the
It makes no difference. Makes no difference. No, it doesn't. All we need to find is there's somewhere that shlichus operates Bal Karcha. Do we have such a place?
I'm trying to say.
You're trying to make
it's not a shlichus. It's a chalos that the father has for the daughter. Not a mitam shlichus.
Well, if it's not a shlichus, then it doesn't work. He's not getting divorced.
Okay.
I mean, if you were giving me a teretz, I would listen to you. But you're trying to split hairs to ask a kasha.
I am asking you.
Right.
That's true.
Now.
Okay.
Al ha'olah shel zayis, we learned that you could write on a leaf of an olive and then give it. Remember, you have to detach the leaf of an olive from the ground, because while it's attached, it's a problem. Because remember, it says v'kosav v'nosan. There shouldn't be anything intervening between the writing and the giving. If you write it attached to the ground, and then you have to detach it, there is something in between the ksiva and the nesina. Now that's only one problem of the alei shel zayis. There's another problem of the alei shel zayis, and that is the Torah says sefer krisus, and not something. It has to be something like a sefer, not something that's attached to the ground. So we'll see. Let's see what's going on over here. So the Gemara says, "Bishloi miyad de eved." I understand the yad of the eved. That the Mishnah says that the Tanakhama says you write it on the horn of a cow and give the cow to her, and it says you write it on the hand of a slave and give the slave to her. Right? Those are the two cases that it says. So the Gemara says, Bishloi miyad the eved. I understand the hand of the eved, you have to give the whole eved to her, because lo yafshel l'mitzay, you can't cut off the hand. Now, the Mefarshim say over here, you can't cut off the hand, because an eved Kanani has mitzvahs like a woman, and therefore, you can't. He has a din like a quasi Jew, and you can't cut off his hand. Keren shel para, but the horn of the cow, liktsaye, why do you have to give her the whole cow? Cut it off, v'leisvala, and then give it to her. So here's where the Gemara says that you can't have anything intervening between the writing and the delivery, because he should write it and give it to her. That's only if it's lacking writing and giving. That there would be something in between the writing and the giving. So you can't cut it off. You would have to give the whole cow. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says you can't do it on food, and you can't do it on animate objects. So therefore, the cow is an animate object, and the leaf of the olive is food for an animal. So my time with Rabbi Yossi Aglili, what's the reason of Rabbi Yossi Aglili that he says it can't be an animate object and it can't be food? The Tanya is safer. It says in the pasuk, safer creases. Ainly ella safer. Minayin l'rabbis called over. How do we know you could write it on paper, on anything else? Talvin leimer v'kosav la mikol makom. So then why does it say safer? Imke ma talvin leimer safer. Ma safer davashem b'ruach chaim. It's not something that's animated. Ve'ein oichel, and it's not a foodstuff. Af kol davashem b'ruach chaim ve'ein oichel. The Rabbanans hold that you could write it on an animal, on Ali Shel Zayis, Rabbanan, Iksiv B'Sefer. If it says because of law, B'Sefer, in a Sefer, K'dekamrit, you'd be translating the pasuk right. But Hashta D'Chsiv, because of law, Sefer creases, Sefer means a narrative, a formula. Hashta D'Chsiv, Sefer, L'Sviris Devarim Ba'alma Hudasa. It means a formula of creases. So therefore it's not talking about what it could be written on. And according to Rabbanan, Hai v'kosav my avdalei. What did they learn from v'kosav? That's coming to tell you that you could divorce a woman with a writing, but not with money. It's coming to tell you b'ksiva miskareshes ve'ena miskareshes b'kesef. She can't be divorced with money. Throughout Masechtas Kedushin, we will see a drash of a yotza v'haisa, makish yitzia lavaya. We compare get to gerushin. So I might think akish yitzia lavaya, ma havaya b'kesef, just like Kedushin could be with money. Af yitzia nami b'havaya kamash malon, because of, not with money. V'idach, the other one, how does he know this drasha? Nafkele misefer creases, and he darshins sefer karsa, only the sefer divorces are, ain't davar acher karsa, not money. B'idach mabayele davar akoreis beinoi lebeina. That a get is only good if it achieves complete severance. No ties left between him and her. Kedetanya. He says, here's your get, almanashali tishti yayin. You'll never drink wine. You won't go to your father. If he says you'll never drink wine, or you'll never go to your father, ain't zekrisis. If he says for a month, so eventually there's a severance of all ties, how is zekrisis? How does he know this din that has to sever all ties? Mikaris krisis. It could have said karis, and it says krisis, you have an extra drasha. Ve'ida karis krisis leidarsha. He doesn't hold that that's two drashas. Wow, that was an easy piece of Gemara. We haven't had an easy piece of Gemara for a while. Mark says I should have learned 16 blot tonight.
And start at 8:45.
What do you say? Was it words of brilliance?
Of course, what else would I say?
They wanted me to start in middle of Marav. Can't speak in middle of Marav.
Were you thinking of doing Marav after the shir at all?
Well, you'll come down to Fairways if you want to become president and suggest it. Now, I hope you're more tactful in your shul. Now, says the new Gemara, new Mishnah. Mark, he's not behaving. Give him a patch.
Sorry, Mark, I tried.
Don't put it on Mark. Don't put it on Mark. Mark's a nice guy.
That's nice of me. He gets all the labor, fruits of my labor, no problem.
Now, ein koisvim b'mechubel karka. You can't write it on something that's attached to the ground. Because like we said, if you write it on something attached to the ground, then afterwards, when you sever it, it's not just because of v'nasan. It's because of katatz v'nasan. So that's no good. Let's plug in the phone here before it... First we have to plug in the plug. Okay, so ein kaisvim b'mechubel karka. You can't write it on something attached to the ground. Kasav b'mechuber, if you wrote it on something attached to the ground, tolshu and uprooted it, v'chasmu and signed it, v'nasnu la kasha. So here we have an opinion different than what we said earlier, that if you wrote it, we're going to see that this is not what it sounds. Because we just said that if it was written and you uprooted it and then you gave it, it's no good. But here we're going to see that the Gemara is going to tell us that it's talking about in the event that Chatzkel wrote the typhus, the boilerplate part of the get. You know, that it doesn't have any personal details. He wrote the boilerplate part of the get, uprooted it, then put in the name and the date and the town and Hariyat Megareshes, and then gave it to her kosher. However, Rabbi Yehuda says no, you can't do that because then you might write the original part, the name also while it's attached. Rabbi Yehuda Paisel should take sivasai v'chasimasai betalish, unless it was written and signed when it was uprooted. Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseiraim ain't kaisvin lo yal anir hamochuk. You can't write on erased parchment, because once the parchment is erased, then a second erasure is not noticeable, so therefore it's able to be forged. V'lo yal diftera, nor on parchment that wasn't treated with gallnut, mipnei shu yochel is daif, because it could be forged. V'chachamim machshirim, and the chacham allow. We'll have to see why the chacham allow to write something that can be forged. We'll talk about that. Kasval mechuber, you could write, if you wrote it when it was attached and then uprooted it and then gave it, it's good. Why? You can't do it, and the assumption is you can't do it because then it's not the kasav v'nasan, it's the kasav v'katatz v'nasan. Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel, nah, it means if you wrote just the boiler part, the part that's not important. It's talking about if you wrote the boilerplate, then you uprooted it, and you wrote the date and the name of the wife, the name of the husband, the name of the town, the Hariyat Megareshes. Where you left the personal details until after you detached it. And it's going according to Rabbi Lazar, the Amr Eidei Mesira Karse. Remember, according to Rabbi Lazar, the V'kosav in the Torah is not the signatures. It's the body of the get. And it's going according to Rabbi Lazar that says Eidei Mesira Karse. So the body of the get has to be written when it's detached. Ain't kaismin typhus. You shouldn't even write the boiler part, the boilerplate of the get when it's attached. Shemi yikasvu typhus, because you might come to write the name of the woman and the man and the Hariyat Megureshes and the town when it's attached. Kosvul the typhus, but if you wrote the boiler plate of the get while it's attached, v'tolshay, and uprooted it, and then kosvul the tayrif, and then wrote the name and the name of the city and the Hariyat Megureshes and the date, v'nosnu l'kasha. So that's the first way to learn the Mishnah, the obvious way to learn the Mishnah. Reish Lakish says no. Chasmu shaninu. Here we're talking about the signatures. Reb Meir, it's going according to Reb Meir that it's the signatures that activate the get. And therefore, when it says v'kosav in the Torah, it's talking about the signatures, not the body of the get. Reb Meir hidamei chasima karse. V'achi kamer. Ein kaisvin Torah, if you can't write the date and the names when it's attached to the ground, Gezeira Shema Yechtam, you might even sign it when it's attached to the ground. Kasvul l'Torah, if you wrote even the names and the date and the place and the Atmik Koreshes while it's attached, Tolshu, and you uprooted it, and Chasmu, and you signed it, which is what Kasav means, V'nasnula, and you gave it to her, kosher, the get is kosher. Well, this is a record, Rabbi say. We finished in record time. We have not had an easy daf like this in a while. Again, notwithstanding Marshall's comment, we did announce yesterday that shir is 8:50 this week, and also we will do now tomorrow night after the shir. We have a chumash shir on Baal Leischa, and we're going to learn the Mishnah Yomi now. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.